you an HR department of one trying to figure out how to balance task and strategy while keeping up with changes in regulatory compliance? Do you need a fresh outlook on old topics? Then stop what you're doing, grab your coffee, and get ready to recharge. If you have people, you have problems to solve and things to do. Your host is Brenda Neckvattle, a 20-year human resource professional, ready to explore the HR industry with veterans of business and life with fresh eyes and new ideas. Learn about the rapidly evolving changes in employment law around the country, as well as new tactics to deploy and build engagement in your workforce. If you're looking to implement new practices to make your job easier in HR, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome back to the Best Practices in Human Resources podcast. I'm Brenda. It's great to have you guys back again, back in the studio, not running around like a mad, insane person, jumping from town to town, city to state, state to state, meeting to meeting, holy cow, adventure to adventure. Back here again, and it's nice to be back in the studio. But today we've got, as always, we've got Lola, the veteran comfort dog, with me, who will probably chime in because she's really great at doing it, and her lovable assistant, Champ, the lovable wonder dog. But most importantly, today we are going to talk about employment law changes that are impacting the nation, what's going on in the country. We have a very special guest today, somebody that I've worked with for quite a while. We're going to be talking about affirmative action plans, like the one thing that nobody wants to talk about. But it's also a little bit of a mystery, and we've got Eli St. Julien from Outsolve. I've known Eli since 2011. Super guy. He's going to be joining in. Incredibly informative. As a matter of fact, he was so good, I barely said anything during our conversation together. So I think this is probably the quietest interview I've ever actually had to give. So we've got some announcements coming up, and of course, as always, at the end, we offer free resources. So just remember, folks, that when you're listening to these episodes, that the information that is available through the podcast really is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing any form of legal advice. If you have a need, you should contact your attorney to obtain that legal advice with respects to whatever particular issue you're up against. If you don't have an employment attorney and you need one, reach out to me and I may be able to refer one to you through our affiliates program, and that is done through Jackson Lewis. All right, so employment changes that are sweeping the nation. Some interesting changes in the landscape. So right now there is a federal bill that has been introduced that actually will be banning sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination, and it actually has passed in the House. So this is something to keep an eye on. Not that anybody hopefully would want to discriminate, but we're going to see some landscape. This is no surprise. We in this profession, we've anticipated this coming down the pike. I'm kind of surprised it has taken as long as it has, but it is definitely in the works. So just keep an eye out for that as well. There's also a new development that is very important, and this is an educational piece. I'm not 100% sure exactly what I'm going to be doing with it just yet, but I have a significant interest in maybe releasing an online course about this. So as I kind of dangle that carrot out in front of everyone's face, just give me a little time to kind of process and see what it is that I want to do with this. But anyway, Title VII discrimination claims in the past have really only been permitted to be processed through the EEOC first, and that's the Equal Opportunity Commission, before there's a determination as to whether or not the parties can go to court. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled that Title VII discrimination claims can now go straight to federal court. So that is a huge shift in the landscape when it comes to what employers' positioning is, what an employee's positioning is. So that's a very big change, and keep your eyes and ears open for that one. It was ruled in the lower courts earlier, but now apparently there was something that came up where it had to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has ruled that a claim can actually bypass the EEOC and go right to court. So Definitely be on the lookout for that. All right, here's an area of the country that we don't really hear a lot about, but out of Ohio, Toledo's city. In the city, remember I talked about this in previous episodes that we've got changes in law at the federal level, the state level, and now at the municipality level. So Toledo City Council actually passed an ordinance prohibiting salary history inquiries. So you can kind of see over time that we've got a trend of where people are trying to eliminate salary history during the actual interview process to prohibit any type of discriminatory action. There's a use in for it, but there are apparently bigger issues out in the world that are deeming that more and more locations back down from that. Over in Texas, paid sick leave in Dallas and San Antonio. You guys, that's going to be taking effect on August 1st. So we had mentioned Dallas earlier. San Antonio is also involved in that as well. So make sure that if you are in Dallas and San Antonio and you do not understand your paid sick leave information, get on it and then make sure that you have what you need in place no later than August 1st, because that stuff is changing relatively quickly. All right, over in California, California has a new law in place. Not a lot of details on it that I'm releasing here, but for those of you that are over there, definitely look into it. Believe it or not, they have identified hairstyles as a discriminating factor. So employers can no longer discriminate from hiring or terminating or engaging in an adverse action based on an individual's hair. Over in New Jersey, they have some, and we're probably going to wind up having to do another episode on this because this is just changing like wildfire. New Jersey has new medical marijuana law changes. So, you guys that are employers over there, you're going to have a really good understanding of how to deal with employee cannabis use over in the state. And same thing with New York too. So New York also they've put some tougher constraints on pay equity and salary history inquiries. We just mentioned, Toledo a little while ago. So again, you guys over in that area, in that corner of the world, definitely want to take a look at that and find out what's going on. Oregon has had some motion on their hashtag #MeToo law. So if you folks are up in Oregon, definitely take a look at what's going on up there. As well, they've also really passed legislation on one of the most generous paid family leave laws in the state. There's also been some other motion up there in regards to non-disclosure, non-disparagement provisions in workplace agreements. So, we've got some motion going on up in that area. Remember, if you've been listening in, you probably recall in a couple of episodes ago that I mentioned that midterm year, usually about July, we see some significant changes that are coming down the pike. And this is a really good example of what that looks like. So it's very specific, it's very targeted. So you folks are definitely going to want to pay attention to what's going on. If there's anything out there that I see of importance and that's a good call out, be sure that I'm going to include it in the podcast. I will also be able to include it in social media, especially if I think it's a big one. And you guys can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Best Practices in HR. Twitter and LinkedIn, it's Brenda Neckbottle. Over on YouTube as well, you can follow me on Brenda Neckbottle, and I'll share this information again in a little while as well. So Eli St. Julien is the Vice President of Sales with Outsolve, and that is located down in New Orleans. He's been with the company for about 13 years, and his ongoing responsibilities include a wide range of things from business development. He performs client needs assessments. He does proposal development and account management. He's a really interesting, very, very nice man with a background in electronic engineering and has been in sales for more than 25 years. He's very knowledgeable on what is required out there for affirmative action planning, EEO1, VETS 4212, and also the EEO1 data that is now required in September. So I'm not going to spoil anything for you guys, but I'm going to give this to you. Normally I do this after the interview, but I want to give this ahead of time as well. And he's going to flip around. But as you guys are listening to this, and if you want to connect with Eli, you can find his information while you're listening. If you go to bestpractices.org, go to my website, click on the affiliates link at the top. And Outsolve is actually one of the recommended vendors that I have worked with. I've worked with them since, and specifically Eli, since 2011. They're a great group. This is all they do. They've got a phenomenal staff, and it's certainly a vendor that I'm not only willing to provide out to those of you who are listening, but continue to support them as well. So, folks, I'd like to welcome Eli to the show. Okay, so we have on the line with us Eli St. Julien, who is a friend of mine that I've actually known for, oh my gosh, almost 10 years now. He is with an organization called Outsolve, which is actually one of our affiliate members over at Best Practices on the website. And what Outsolve does is they specifically focus in on the construction of affirmative action planning, but there's so much more, and I'm going to hold and allow him to share that with you guys. So Eli, thank you so much for joining the call. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Very good. So do me a favor. So tell us a little bit about you, and then would you just kind of go into telling us about Outsolve and what Outsolve does?
Okay. I am a 17-year employee of Outsolve, and I am the resident storyteller. My my job is to tell the Outsolve story to as many people as I possibly can, and share our capabilities and our services and support and our culture and all of those sorts of things, and ensure that it's a good fit for organizations that need those services, and then our staff makes all of those stories come true. So that's basically what I do. I'm the resident salesperson, and I've been with the company for, as I said, 17 years, and it's been a fun ride.
That's awesome. So Eli, I'll kind of give you guys a little bit of a back. So Eli and I met when I was working with a larger company, because we actually recommended Outsolve to our government contractors in the DC area, in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so I connected with Eli in 2011. And we have had a really cool relationship ever since. We've worked together both with clients and actually for some of the companies that I've worked with as well. So these guys absolutely know what they're doing. Every client that I have ever recommended to go to Outsolve has had literally nothing but glowing reviews about the organization, and they are just absolutely full of knowledge. And basically what they do is that they construct the affirmative action plans, the EEO1 report, the VETS 4212 reporting, and we're going to talk about this a little bit down the road, but they also now engage in the EEO1 pay reporting that is being required for 2019. So, Eli, can you go ahead and share with us? So for those who don't know what an affirmative action plan is, can you help some of those listeners understand what that does and what the purpose is behind it?
Absolutely. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed an executive order that basically says that if you are going to participate in any type of government work that is paid for by taxpayer dollars that come from every ethnicity and every gender, then your organization needs to statistically reflect the general population of the areas that you serve. And so what the Affirmative Action Plan does is that for any organization that participates in government contracts to the tune of $50,000 or more on an annual basis, that has at least 50 or more employees, must prepare an affirmative action plan. And that plan takes a snapshot of their work groups and compares it to the general populations that they serve to ensure that there is a fair statistical representation of the protected classes associated with affirmative action planning and compliance. Those are women and minorities, individuals with disabilities, and veterans. And so what the affirmative action plan does is it creates a storybook or a backdrop or a baseline of your organization as it exists on a given date and time. And then every year on that anniversary date, it's updated to compare your organization on that date and in comparison to your organization a year prior, taking into account the activity that has occurred between those two dates, activity being hires, promotions, terminations, and applicants. And so what Outsolve does is Outsolve helps a client prepare these affirmative action plans and then provide them with all of the support that goes along with that. Because not only are you responsible for preparing an affirmative action plan, but you are responsible for having internal HR processes that are fair and equitable and that attract and retain and promote those protected classes. So once your affirmative action plan is complete, our goal is to assess those internal HR processes that you must be able to prove that you're doing. Things such as having accurate dispositioning codes for those that fall out of the applicant pool. Are they being consistently used? Are those records being consistently kept across all of your hiring areas? Your responsibility to outreach and good faith efforts, postings, posters, taglines in your subcontracts and on your web portal and your advertisements, all of those things that one must do, that a contractor must do in order to be fully compliant with the regulations and to be audit ready. We assess, we provide tools and resources and guidance and best practices on how to improve those, make them more efficient, more effective, but more importantly, to make them defensible in an audit, because our responsibility to our clients is to ensure that they are audit ready at all times, because when that audit letter hits the door and the organization that polices affirmative action planning and compliance out of the Department of Labor is the OFCCP, the Office of Federal Contracts and Compliance Programs, that organization will send out scheduling letters or audit letters. And if you receive one, you've got a 30-day window to respond. So it makes sense to be audit ready at all times, because if you're not prepared, then it becomes a fire drill and becomes very, very difficult and costly to manage. So what we do is we provide you with the guidance and the tools and the resources to not only have the plan in place, but have those internal HR processes audit ready, and then to make ourselves available to train and teach and support any issues that may come up during the plan year.
And I'm gonna jump in here and throw something out there. And this is a tidbit. So if anybody who's listening is a government contractor, and you may not know this, either you're a new contractor or an old no. If you've been around for a while, you probably do know this. But here's a little gig. So the government doesn't really tend to throw any punches when it comes to announcements. So you get easily 30 days, and we get the same thing over, like if there's an I-9 audit and you get the letter from ICE. But here's the thing. With federal contractors, there's actually an opportunity to find out if you're going to get audited even before the letter comes out, and they actually release those names prior in advance. And so anytime when I was working with government contractors and the list would get announced, I would go and look at the list, because they actually pull all those names throughout the year. And then I would look to see, it's like, are any of my clients or the companies that I was working for actually going to be audited, which gave me the opportunity to say, hey, listen, if you don't have this together, you need to call Eli. Or if I thought for a moment that we were going to get audited, I was already prepared to pick up that phone and call Eli and say, hey, listen, we're getting the letter. So you can actually find out, and then they update the list throughout the year, but they announce it. It's not anything that they hide.
That's right. That's right. It's called a corporate scheduling announcement list or
Yes.
letter, and a CSAL is the acronym for it. And you're right. It is posted every year. It's public information, and if you're on that list, your locations are on that list. We've got clients with 10 establishments on that list. One came out earlier this year. With close to 3,000, I think, locations on it. And those companies, of course, we are working with to prepare them for that inevitable audit.
So help people understand what the EEO1 and the VETS 4212 is, please, as well, because those are both very important components of what you guys do, in addition to the affirmative action plan.
Absolutely. EEO1s are reports that the EEOC requires that is due in the first quarter of each year. It's just another report to identify the numbers of different ethnicities in each of your work groups. And historically, it has not included a new component, a new twist, the W-2 information and hours worked. But now it does, and it has caused quite a stir in the industry.
Yes, it has.
And,
Holy cow.
I'm sorry?
Holy cow. So much of a stir that even sometimes the government doesn't even have the answer.
Well, and to this date, we have not yet gotten the final specs on the requirement and the expectation on the requirement, but we do know that it is due by September 30th, and we also know that it looks like it's definitely going to happen this time around, and our clients are lining up for us to not only prepare both their EEO1's component, their EEO1 component 1 and component 2, but we are also highly recommending that prior to sending that W-2 data, that compensation data to the EEOC, that an organization vet that data so that they understand what issues might exist before the EEOC does, and hopefully take corrective action. Now, this year, what is being requested is 2017 and 2018 W-2 data. You can't do anything about that. Those 2 years are over, and there's nothing you can do about it. But we are suggesting that with the 2018 W-2 data, if you were aware of any inequities, any blatant inequities in your comp data, and begin to take some corrective action in preparation for the 2019 requirement, which is going to be due first quarter of 2020, then you can then show good faith should the EEOC identify any findings. You can show good faith and have a strategy and a process in place and working to gradually make adjustments where needed. It does take a long time to affect or change comp structures and that sort of thing, and it takes some skill and strategy so it not create any additional issues. So, we've got a PhD, we've got a couple of PhD level statisticians and industrial psychologists on staff, and that's all they do is pay equity and risk analyses and salary surveys and multiple regression analyses and all of those sorts of compensation analyses in order to help companies understand if they are fairly and equitably paying their people, and not discriminating unknowingly in most cases, against a protected class, because that can certainly evolve into something much more difficult to defend. And so that's the purpose of it, is to give the EEOC an advanced look at your compensation, because pay equity is a big issue, and it's an issue that contractors are going to have to live with, and going to have to restructure and prioritize. Otherwise, it could get very, very ugly very quickly.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people really realize that affirmative action goes back to the Johnson administration. He was probably if you look at history, I think it would be safe to say that he was probably the one president that was extremely focused on his strategy for civil liberties. And I think that as over the decades, as information has become more readily available and at the speed that it becomes available, I remember specifically that affirmative action really didn't start rising up again until about like the late 90s, when there was a very large number of occurrences of claims of discrimination in the workplace. And so that was about the first time that I really ever heard anything about having to take some form of affirmative action. I wasn't in the government contracting sector at the time. I was actually in the retail sector. And in a larger corporation, like the one that I was working in, it was positioned as being highly advisable to complete an affirmative action plan, not a requirement if you had more than 100 employees.
Yeah. No. It was at the height of the civil rights movement, and so you're absolutely right. I think Lyndon Johnson, was in the midst of understanding that it was a necessary thing for our country. And then then the Obama administration comes into office, and the first law that it signs is the Lilly Ledbetter law, which focuses on pay equity.
Yep.
And since that time, it has just continually evolved and become more of a daily requirement of the contractor community. And quite honestly, it goes beyond the contractor community. It is every organization of 100 or more employees must do an EEO-1 report with comp data. So even if you are not a government contractor, but you are of 100 or more employees, then you must send compensation data to the EEOC.
Yep. So so really small business 100 and up, no one's spared from this point.
No. And that just wants to show you what the priority is today.
Yeah.
And so it just behooves these organizations to begin to prioritize this and focus on it, because it's the ramifications are that if you're a government contractor, of course the audits, the inquiry, the additional reporting, the fact that you could lose your government contracts if there's some systemic, egregious acts of discrimination that can be proven beyond the desk audit, because the OFCCP can come on site, it can interview staff, they can request just about anything. They're like the IRS. But if you are not a contractor, the EEOC, of course, has that same level of power and can escalate this thing to fines. And of course, the publicity is never good.
No.
Hurtful to your business. So all of these things are reasons why it's important for organizations to prioritize this and make it a part of their their culture to continually look at ways to make their compensation programs fair, equitable, and make sense along the way. And so it takes some time, but and it takes money because you do have to hire the experts to do that.
Right.
But it's very much worth your while to
Yeah.
do.
So would you briefly just share with folks too what the VETS 4212 is as well? I know we've
Yeah.
talked about EEO1, the pay data, and affirmative action plan, but a lot of people don't really, unless you're in the government contracting field, they don't really know what the VETS 4212 is.
Yeah, it's another report. It's another report that goes to the Veterans Agency, I believe. I don't. It's another agency
Mm-hmm.
that it's delivered to, and I'm sorry, Brenda, but I'm having a brain freeze.
No,
But
it's okay.
but it's done. It's done in the third quarter of the year, and it's a requirement, and it too is required of any organization that has a contract, a government contract of $150,000 or more on an annual basis. So if you've got a single government contract of 150 or multiple government contracts of $150,000 or more, you must prepare a VETS 4212 report. And the VETS 4212, for those that don't know, it took the place of the VETS 100.
Right. Yep. So, and what I have found interesting over the years is that, I mean, first off, so some people may have the questions like, why is government contracting so strict? Well, first and foremost is that, the government has over time discovered major gaps in the ability to keep the honest folk honest and to keep the dishonest folk out, right? So so that's why government contracting, and the way I explain it to clients is that you remember the show Get Smart and the cone of silence, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you stand in the cone of silence, it has a specific circumference. Well, when you're in government contracting, that space inside of that cone, the cone of compliance, gets much skinnier. Simply because you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's. Misinvoicing the government incorrectly time and time again, major flag, because there's a significant fiduciary responsibility that the government is entitled to or has to the American people, because it's not like the government goes out and invests money to spend it. They get it from us. So,
Sure.
right. So it really is to make sure that the money that they're collecting is used appropriately and the government isn't being taken advantage of. And, God help you if you are trying to do that, because it's a pretty harsh course. And I've seen a number of companies go down that path. But also, is that we've kind of shared that there's a little bit of a seepage into the private sector when it comes to some of this compliance, specifically with affirmative action planning. And it is, I'm only going to speak from my professional opinion about what I've seen, but in the first term of the Obama administration, we had a significant number of executive orders that came down, and there was like 12 that were going to go into effect through the years of 2014 to 2016. And I remember sitting at this conference listening to this, and my head was swimming because I'm thinking, like, how are we going to be doing all these things? And pay equity was a big target at the time. But what it also does is it has the ability, government contracting, so putting restrictions on government contractors. And again, my honest opinion was I think there was too much introduced in a very short period of time, because it really made things very challenging for government contractors, particular smaller ones, that didn't have a lot of the resources, and therefore companies like Outsolve were really like a godsend, because I sent like 3 or 4 to you at that time. But it does open up the opportunity and for influence for the government to start looking out towards the private sector as well. And again, pay equity data is a perfect example of this. There are significant issues in the country that some people may not have a direct head-on answer for, But this is one avenue that the government can influence a look inside the doors of the private sector to make sure that, folks are being treated accordingly and fairly.
That's right. That's right. No, I don't think anyone is safe.
No.
If any organization is safe, if in fact they've got a process or a systemic environment of discriminating against anyone, and
Hmm.
and I think that is the trend, and quite frankly, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it's if in fact we are going to benefit from, as you said, those dollars that come from us all, of every race, every ethnicity, um, every gender, then our organization should reflect that and should be cognizant of that fact,
Yeah.
and do all that we can to be inclusive and diverse and reflective of the communities that we serve.
So there is a major objection that I get, and I have no doubt I would literally bank my next paycheck on this statement, but because I'm sure you get it too. And the objection is, oh, you know what? We're too small. We're a small business and we don't really count.
Mhm.
Yeah. How many times have you heard that one?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think the government addresses that, as far as government contracting is concerned, and the number is 50. If you are less than 50 employees, you don't necessarily have to comply, but if you're 50 or more employees, you do have to comply, if as it pertains to government contracting.
Yep.
And then if you are not a government contractor, the number is 100.
Right.
So, if you're greater than 100, you have to meet certain obligations, or if you're less than 100, you have to meet other obligations. So, I think, for those small organizations that are saying we're too small, there are ways in which you can efficiently and cost effectively address these types of requirements and mandates so that your organization can still flourish. But
Right.
the reality is this: for any organization that is not creating a culture to attract and retain and promote women, minorities, veterans, and the disabled, you are doing yourself a business disservice. And the reason is because statistics clearly show that the fastest growing groups of available future employees are women, minorities, veterans, and the disabled. And so, if in fact you are going to grow your business, from a business perspective, it makes all the sense in the world for you to find ways in which you can create a culture and an environment to attract those protected classes. It's from a business perspective, not just a compliance perspective, but just from a business perspective, it makes all the sense in the world.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you are not going to be able to attract or retain those protected classes, and it's going to be very, very difficult for you to grow your business.
Yeah, and it's hard enough already out there with the type of market that's currently in place because right now it's an employees market.
Yep.
And if you look at the numbers that are out there, and you look at where our unemployment is right now, if you were to compare it and parry it up against the number of individuals that are unable to work in the workforce, you're going to quickly realize that everybody who pretty much is capable of working right now, for the most part, is. So that just makes it even more challenging. But going back to what I was sharing earlier, is with the objection is that my counter, and I love how you put it, I love how you put that it is a business disservice. And absolutely right. And that is certainly one coin of the argument for sure. But the other coin, and Eli, I know you've seen this, is that the smaller you are, when it's discovered that you're not compliant, the bigger the target you become.
Yeah. Well, I'm not quite sure the bigger the target you become, but the bigger the impact
Yeah.
should you be targeted.
Right. Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's the issue. I mean, to be quite honest with you, the OFCCP does go after the big fish, okay, the
They
big
do.
companies, because they can get the big awards and the
Absolutely.
huge publicity and all of that sort of stuff. So the smaller organizations kind of do get a pass on just being a neon light out there to approach. But that doesn't negate the fact that you are on the list, that you
Mm-hmm.
are benefiting from these government contracts, that the OFCCP follows the money and will find you eventually, and you will eventually receive a scheduling letter, and that you must put yourself in a position to defend your organization because you never know when it's going to happen.
Yep.
And so, and then the impact for a smaller organization is much greater because
Yes.
such a hassle for the OFCCP to inquire within an organization and have you vetted throughout your organization in terms of your hiring practices, your record keeping processes, your good faith efforts, and to constantly ask you for additional reporting, it just takes you away from your business. And that's the impact that I think can be devastating to a smaller organization.
Yeah. And smaller organizations too. I mean, not that bigger organizations' pockets run deeper because everybody's going to have to, financially manage their cash flow just like everybody else. I think larger organizations have an opportunity to tap into money sooner, quicker, and more efficiently if they need it. But when small companies get popped by fines, and if you have not successfully defended yourself against the OFCCP, in this particular area, or if you wind up having to go to court for, I don't know, let's say like a discrimination case such as like sexual harassment or hostile work environment, those fines, the penalties, the interest, all those things that go in, the actual costs associated with just getting everything together. I mean, honestly, it racks up there really quickly to the point where your business literally is at risk of shutting its doors if you can't fund that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so much cheaper an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Oh, I would so much rather spend $5,000 to protect a company than spend $500,000 to try and defend it.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's exactly what would happen.
That's exactly what would happen. It's a very cost-effective way for you to understand, how your organization compares within the populations that you serve,
Hmm.
and it's valuable information in terms of growing your business. So
Yes.
it's not money that is just unnecessarily spent. I think you get good value for your money in terms of the information that you gain, the knowledge that you now have, and the environment that you create to grow your business. And so that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, Eli, thank you so much for coming on. You have done such a good job of explaining it. This is probably like the quietest I've ever been on any podcast interview that I've done so far.
Well,
So,
that's surprising because
I know.
I know you, Brenda, and you can talk when you want to. So no. It's thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. This is a first for me, and I love what I do. I think it's a valuable resource that we provide at a very efficient and cost-effective rate. And and so if there's anybody out there that might need our services, just feel free to reach out to Outsolve at any time, and we'd be more than happy to help.
So can you share how people can reach out to you guys? Your contact information? Are you on social media, website, all that good
Yeah,
stuff?
we've got all of that, the tweets and the blogs and all of that sort of stuff, which is, you can find all of that information on our website, which is outsolve.com, www.outsolve.com. Of course, we've got a toll-free number, and that telephone number is 888-414-2410. And certainly anyone can email me if they would like. I can be reached at St. Julien, that's ESTJULIEN, @outsolve.com. So we're available in any of those means.
That's excellent. And then if you can also find a link to the Outsolve website too by going on bestpractices.org, clicking on the affiliations tab, and then you'll actually see them listed. So thank you so much again, Eli, for joining us. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda. I really appreciate it.
So that was an awesome conversation with Eli. That was absolutely fantastic. Really loved it. It's always a joy talking to him. But you know what? I want to hear what's on your mind. I want to know what you are looking to learn in the field of human resources and your personnel challenges. So you can submit your questions on the bestpractices.org website by clicking on the podcast link from the menu, and down towards the bottom of the page is a submission form for you to post your questions, which I actually may read on an upcoming episode. So to do that, you can visit bestpractices.org, and that is the website. You can jump on and do that. And then today's question was actually posed to me on Quora, and I thought how it was worded was really interesting. And I know we did a couple of episodes ago on what kind of questions are your employees actually researching. Watching the number of hits and the number of people that listen to it really told me that you guys are curious as to what's going on. It has also given me some direct feedback that this is a point of concern for employers. And I think part of this, what I'm about ready to read, is it kind of goes into what some employers are thinking, because it's how it's worded, how the question is worded. And I'll explain that in a second. So the question that I got is, are non-disclosure agreements being overused by some organizations to prevent former employees from exposing abuses in the workplace? Now, first off, what I'm hearing in this is that whoever wrote this has an less than desirable experience somewhere. I think there's a lack of education as to what non-disclosure agreements are, and how they're being actually applied. So I think this person is actually fishing for a win in an audience buildup and response. What this individual got was not that. That's just my impression of how this is worded. So there's a level of education that's missing as to like what non-disclosures are actually used for. This person clearly doesn't understand what their rights are, and believe it or not, a lot of this, for an employee to understand what their rights are in the workplace, are up on your walls in your office, and they're identified in employment posters. So let's go through this question. So first off, non-disclosure agreements don't prohibit employees from talking about workplace conditions. What they prohibit employees or anybody who's signing a non-disclosure agreement is actual business information or something that is specific in the nature of business. It's usually proprietary in its nature, which means that it is so closely guarded that if the word were to get out and somebody were to take that and use it, it could literally destroy another organization. So you typically, anybody who goes into a sales agreement, contracting agreement, or is looking at a potential business relationship will be asked to sign a non-disclosure statement, meaning that you're holding the information close and to the heart. Now, it's also works in conjunction with the confidentiality agreement, which means that certain elements of what it is that of your business dealings are held in confidence, and that can be a wide range of things. But an NDA is really all about holding the information to the company close to the vest and not getting that information out. And it's a written contract that simply says, yeah, I'm not going to go around talking to people about what we're working on, what projects we're working on, or if I'm even affiliated with you as a partner, as an organization. So that's really the intention of it. Non-disclosure agreements cannot restrict an employee from talking about workplace conditions. That's a violation against the National Labor Relations Act. We've mentioned earlier in sporadically in some prior episodes that anybody can talk about what's going on in the workplace, and even if it's not like good, they are still permitted to talk about it. And probably one of the things that frustrates people the most, or employers the most, is that people can actually talk about their salary, and that's protected. That is protected under NLRA. It's a concerted and protected activity, which means concerted is more than one person, and it's identified as an activity that is where an employer is prohibited from exercising any type of disciplinary action or adverse action against the employee. So these are the kinds of questions I hear and I see a lot that are out there in the world. And my goal is to bring you information as to how to manage through them at a very high level. Now, again, everybody's situation is going to be different. So if you're running into stuff like this and you need somebody to talk to, by all means, reach out to me. I'm available to have these kinds of conversations. You can go to bestpractices.work. You can go up to the top of the page and click on book time, and you can select, you can actually book time, put yourself on my calendar, and we'll work through some of these challenges out. So this I thought was a really interesting question. I'm glad we brought this one forward. And this is exactly what a lot of companies run up against. Small, medium, large. Large and medium tend to have resources that have the ability to effectively manage this. Small, not so much. So, by all means, you are welcome to reach out to me. You can follow me, and if there's anything else that's kind of wild, wonky, and cool, kind of similar to this one, I'm going to put it out on Instagram. I'm going to put it out on Facebook, put it out on all the social media channels. So you can find me Instagram and Facebook at Best Practices in HR. Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube is Brenda Neckbottle. So again, you can follow me also on the website, bestpractices.work. That's a really great landing page, good place for you guys to start. Also, we've got some upcoming topics that are going to be really cool on some future episodes. I'm actually really excited about them. I know summer is, there's a lot going on with everybody on a personal level. So believe it or not, right now there's not a lot from a compliance level that's going on, with the exception of those people who have to prepare for the EEO and reports. So summer tends to be a very quiet time of the year, unless a company has specifically scheduled something like benefits renewal or annual training or something like that. So we've got time to do some really great pieces of content and interviews and stuff like that, which I'm looking up. So we're going to be talking about how do you look inward at your company to prepare from an HR standpoint for a potential upcoming recession. There's been a lot of conversation with the economists out there. They really believe it's coming, and if economists tend to really believe it's coming, I tend to listen because I remember what 2008 was like, and it was horrible. So we've also got a guest that's going to be coming on to ask me some tough HR questions, and I mean, she's tough. She's one of my clients. I adore her. She's great. And she really tends to give me a run for my money, and I enjoy it. And she's just a really great person, so you're going to enjoy that. We also might take a look at some benefits renewal planning. We're going to talk about government contracting with another guest coming up, and then also take a look at how do you deal with business disruptors. So we got some really cool stuff coming up, and I'm very excited about where this is going. So listen, guys, thank you again for joining me. If this was your first time, then you had a fantastic session, and And please, we've got 17 other episodes that we've done so far. So, check them out. There's really good content, really good information out there for you. And if you've come back, thank you so much. I really appreciate the fact. Usually I throw this up at the beginning of the show, but gratitude is the same where it's placed everywhere. So I really do appreciate you guys coming back and spending time with me and listening to what's going on. There's a tremendous amount of good stuff out there, and I'm going to continue bringing it to you guys. And I will talk to you all soon next time. Have a good one, folks.